Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I'm reviewing A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. This is his third novel, which was published in 1908. It's a novel about romance and politics and tourism. In the first part of the novel, we follow a young woman named Lucy Honeychurch, and she is going on holiday to Italy with her companion and chaperone, Miss Bartlett. They arrive at the Pensione Bertolini, a hotel in Florence, where they meet other travellers, including the Bohemian author Miss Lavish, the English vicar Mr. Beebe, and most outrageously, the outspoken socialist Mr. Emerson with his adult son George. It's these two men who immediately draw attention when, on the arrival of Lucy and Miss Bartlett, they suggest that they swap rooms with them so that the ladies might enjoy a view, which they say they wouldn't appreciate to the same degree. For some reason, this mild gesture of generosity is met with absolute outrage from the other guests, who consider the very idea improper that these ladies might have to sleep in rooms that previously these men have slept in. Lucy soon realizes there's a whole lot of gossip surrounding Mr. Emerson and his son. And the old Mr. Emerson is rumoured to have murdered his wife. The young Mr. Emerson is generally very awkward in company. And worst of all, they are socialists. So Lucy's stay in Italy is quite sobering. The hotel is full of English people acting like the worst kinds of tourists. Even the landlady, Signora Bertolini, turns out to be a Cockney. And overall, it isn't quite the dream holiday that Lucy had imagined. She's very much described as a young woman who's been going along with what's expected of her for most of her life, and who's been quite happy to do so. But a single excursion to the countryside and an encounter in a field of violets is going to change her life forever. That was the first part. The second part is set in England, with Lucy dealing with the consequences of her holiday and trying to adjust to how she has changed as a person and returning back to her old life. This is overall a very subtle book. There's a lot between the lines. And there's a lot that you have to really pay attention to in order to understand. And that's because it is, in a way, a society novel in which, English people of the Edwardian age talk to each other like English people of the Edwardian age did. And that means not saying what they mean. And in some regard, even their inner thoughts that we are witnessing being sort of covered under layers and layers of repression and society. This also requires a bit of an understanding of very subtle social relationships and of the characters as variants or deviations of specific stereotypes. For example, there's Miss Bartlett, the chaperone. There's a certain image that we have of an older single lady who accompanies a young woman abroad. This is a character trope that we are familiar with a lot of specifically English classic fiction. A certain idea of perhaps the power that she wields, the influence, and maybe some resentment. The idea that there might be tensions between her and the young woman she's supposed to protect. And Forster is very aware of these stereotypes and he works with them, sometimes subverting them. Lucy Honeychurch herself is a complex character like that, because we meet her as a young, clearly wealthy woman traveling abroad. And this is set in a time where tourism abroad is only just picking up. In fact, a German travel guide is featured quite heavily in the book that she consults at every opportunity to find out about the various sites of Florence. So we have this idea of an upper class, maybe aristocratic woman. And then later we find out that she is actually the daughter of, I think, a solicitor. This might not sound like a big deal. So she's the daughter of a solicitor rather than the daughter of a lord. But in terms of English society at the time, that's a huge difference because that puts her solidly in the middle class, very rich middle class, but still middle class. And so that changes the expectations that she has of herself, and that changes the expectations that others have of her, in particular this notion of an expectation of conformity. Forster is an absolute master at playing with these archetypes, especially the ones that he subverts. And we see these characters at play in two very different settings, with the first part of the book being set in Italy and the second in England. There is this subgenre of early 20th century English fiction which has English characters going away specifically to Italy, where they are magically changed and transformed by the experience. E.M. Forster wrote another novel with that same concept before A Room with a View, called Where Angels Fear to Tread, in which a young woman who's unhappy with her life travels to Italy and has her life changed there. The plots of these books are not similar, the atmosphere isn't similar, but that premise, that idea is. This novel plays with that trope in a more satirical way. It's very self-aware. In fact, there is one character in the book who is a novelist, who's described as this bohemian liberal who says things just to shock others. And in her own words, this is the book that she is writing while she is on holiday in Italy. There will be a good deal of local colouring, descriptions of Florence and the neighbourhood, and I shall also introduce some humorous characters. And let me give you all fair warning, I tend to be unmerciful to the British tourist. When I read that line, I immediately thought this is E.M. Forster describing his own book by using what's essentially a comic relief character to say these words. So he's very aware of what he's doing. He's very aware of the type of novel he's writing. He's very aware of the cliches. He's very aware of having an English character who's kind of stuck in her life go to Italy and be freed there. This is also a commentary on tourism. And again, E.M. Forster is very aware of the fact that he's writing this from the point of view of the tourist. There's this idea in the book that all of the characters that are at this hotel have travelled to Italy to see the real Italy. And that's a phrase that's thrown about very liberally. But of course they all stay in the English hotel, surrounded by English people, with pictures of the king on the wall. They go to their English church and they do all of their excursions in the tourist spots of Florence, reading there, like I said, German, but presumably translated into English, travel guide. They are so intimidated anytime they actually have to interact with any Italians. It's hilarious. It also serves as an example of another theme that's big in the book, and that is this duality of propriety and impropriety. There's sex and politics and society all presented in contrast. On the one hand you have the English, on the other you have the Italian. You have marriage and you have sex. You have the proper and you have the indecent. And you have the conservative on the one hand and on the other the socialist. The way each character relates to each of these concepts is nuanced, and it's not always what one might expect. This is all exemplified in one scene, for example, where they're all out on a drive to go to the countryside, and the driver of the carriage, who is a young Italian man, invites his girlfriend along to sit next to him. And they get a bit friendly with each other and a bit amorous, and the English characters are so outraged by that they start a huge argument. They stop the carriage and they end up basically throwing them both out of the carriage, which is very dumb because now they're stuck on a carriage with the driver being offended and sort of sitting by the side of the road. The double standard is glaring. These tourists are there to see the real Italy, but are scared and horrified and outraged every time they come in contact with it. Except, of course, the protagonist, whose reaction is a little more of a development. She's very observant. She sees these double standards, she sees the hypocrisy, and that makes her grow as a character. So she returns to England a changed woman. But the change isn't so much because of her experience of Italy and of Italians. It's much more her experience of her fellow English travellers. So when she's back, she finds that she doesn't quite fit into society anymore. On the other hand, she's not a natural rebel, and so she refuses to accept certain changes within her, and she tries even harder to conform. In the second half, that inner conflict is the driving force of her character. All of the things that she's absorbed in the first half of the book come back to bite her, and in the second half, she learns how to deal with that. This might all sound a bit heavy, but at the same time, this is a light novel, it's a warm novel, it's a holiday read. And I mean, it's a beach and sunshine kind of holiday read, not a Christmas holiday kind of read. It's very, very funny. E.M. Forster has that Jane Austen style social satire down for the early 20th century. And his writing's so clever and so funny, and there's so much richness there that reading it is just a delight. It's also a wonderful book for rereads. There's so much there that I missed on my first read of the book, which I discovered on a second read. And I know that when I read it a third time, there'll be even more for me to see and to notice. If you haven't read any E.M. Forster novel, this is a decent book to start with. It's not the book that I would recommend to be your very first E.M. Forster read. I made a whole video about that, by the way, if you're new to E.M. Forster. Some suggestions about which books you might want to read first. But A Room with a View is a very archetypal E.M. Forster. It's very quintessential E.M. Forster. So if you've read any of his other books before, then I can guarantee that you're going to enjoy this one. If you enjoy social satire, if you enjoy, for example, Jane Austen books, then you will certainly like this one as well. And if you like books about holidays and books that describe other places, that describe people abroad, then you'll certainly get a lot out of this one as well. It's a romance and it's a comedy, but it's quite political as well. There's a lot of richness in the book, and it's become one of my favorite E.M. Forster reads. So this is the first video of my 12 Decades of Christmas series, in which I'll review one book from every decade between the 1900s and the 2010s in the run-up to Christmas. So today's book was from the 1900s. Tomorrow's review is going to be about a book from the 1910s and so on. These aren't necessarily like my favorite books of the decade. They're more so books that I haven't done a dedicated review video for, but that I want to talk about. You can find the rest of the playlist linked in the description box. If you're watching this at any point after December 2023, this is all irrelevant. Thank you for watching. Bye!